Martyrs Square, Algiers city centre, June the 5th. Campaigning in the Arab world's first free multi-party elections ended here in tear gas and shooting. It led to a state of siege, the government's resignation and postponed elections. Algeria's fledgling democracy crushed between a repressive state machine and Islamic extremists. Martyrs Square just 10 days earlier. 40,000 of the faithful had come to support a general strike called by the main Islamic opposition party, the Front Islamique du Salut, or FIS. It was to mark the beginning of a series of mass demonstrations which finally provoked the military clampdown. The fundamentalists had swept the board in last year's local elections, and they were outraged that the government had now rigged the ballot to cheat them out of victory in the upcoming national elections. They demanded a change in the rules and the president's resignation. Their leader is the paternal figure of Abbasi Madani. Perhaps their favourite is his deputy, the great orator Ali Belhaj. He doesn't just quote from the Quran. The crowd love him for his scathing attacks on the corruption of one-party government and for his vision of an Islamic utopia.
وما داخلين من أجل سيارة وما داخلين من أجل فيلا احنا داخلين من أجل أن نقول للناس قال الله وقال رسوله.
This then is the genie the Algerian authorities tried to bottle up in the weeks before the general election. Algeria was perhaps the last Arab country that anyone thought would be gripped by fundamentalism. It's so sophisticated, Algiers could easily pass for a southern European capital. Algeria is now searching for a new identity. The Hanin family is relatively fortunate. 8 of them share 3 rooms, and they don't have to sleep in shifts like some of their neighbours. The daily routine consists of the women struggling to clean and cook for the family. Of their children, one son is a student and the other unemployed. Neither holds out much hope of finding a job. They leave the women and go out each night to join the gangs in the streets. They're known as hittistes, which means people who prop up walls. The rate of unemployment for school leavers is a staggering 63%. So the alleys of Bab el-Oued at night are full of young men with nothing to do. Young men waiting for a sense of direction, a message of hope.
La dernière fois.
Oui.
Alors, qu'est-ce que vous pensez de FIS maintenant? Vous allez voter encore pour eux?
Bien sûr, je vais voter FIS. Et je crois qu'il va y avoir un changement total. Parce que le FIS, c'est la confiance. C'est ça. Pour moi, mon opinion à moi, et même les jeunes comme moi pensent comme ça.
C'est-à-dire, le FLN, il a eu un changement, oui. Même il a des promesses aussi. Mais pourquoi? Pour avoir le pouvoir. Pour que le peuple algérien vote pour le FLN. Mais les Algériens, ils connaissent cette politique. C'est-à-dire, ils n'ont aucun espoir. Pour voter FLN, c'est pas possible. Parce qu'ils ont déjà fait des massacres.
And FIS know the power of their appeal to ordinary people.
بطبيعة الحال الجبهة الإسلامية هي جبهة الشعب. هي تعبر عن إرادة الشعب وعن رغبة الشعب وعن اختيار الشعب. هي حزب شعبي ولذلك يتجاوب الشعب معها.
But at the Islamic University in Constantine, it's now the fundamentalists who've taken control. Here, militant students have taken over the classrooms. And true to Islam, there's sexual segregation, even in political action. The women are protesting inside and watching on television the demonstrations of their male colleagues. Outside, the men come from the poorest areas of town, the unemployed and the disenchanted, to back the fundamentalist cause. And their slogans are simple. There's no God but Allah, Muhammad is his prophet. FIS's support doesn't only come from being a protest movement. It attracts people because it represents a range of Islamic community activities.
Je viens à ce marché parce que c'est moins cher.
Et pourquoi c'est moins cher?
Parce que c'est un marché islamique.
C'est le marché de FIS?
Oui.
On est prospère. On est des musulmans, on reste musulmans.
Et pourquoi pas vous votez pour le FLN?
Le FLN, ce n'est pas un parti islamique. On est musulmans, on veut vivre musulman.
Government attempts at democracy have been accompanied by a tentative process of glasnost. The state-run television station ENTV has given opposition parties some limited access to the public.
مساء الخير سيداتي سادتي واهلا ومرحبا بكم معنا في نشرة الثامنة.
But by and large, the news is still the mouthpiece of the ruling party. Tonight, the FIS marches are low down the running order, and they're followed by a government statement saying the fundamentalists' call for a general strike has failed. ENTV's pro-government tendencies are a constant source of irritation to FIS. The president's reluctance to put himself up for election meant he failed the democratic test. But campaigners for democracy like Khalida Messaoudi feel the fundamentalists are as bad, if not worse.
Je pense que le FIS a compris que il ne pourra pas accéder au pouvoir d'une manière démocratique. Et à partir de cela, il a tiré ses conclusions. Que pour arriver au pouvoir, parce que le FIS veut le pouvoir, il lui fallait absolument y arriver par la violence. Et pour y arriver par la violence, il faut absolument créer une situation insurrectionnelle, de tension et de violence. Et c'est ce que le FIS essaye de faire. Il essaye d'occuper la rue pour imposer une tension et pour mener le pouvoir à un affrontement qui lui permettra, à lui, le FIS, de prendre le pouvoir. C'est un parti totalitaire qui porte en lui un projet de société totalitaire et qui a les mêmes méthodes que les fascistes, oui, les mêmes méthodes. Les méthodes violentes qui contraignent les personnes et qui, bien sûr...
Et de la terreur?
Bien sûr, la terreur sur tous les niveaux, la terreur au niveau intellectuel, la terreur donc intellectuelle, la terreur politique, la terreur physique, à tous les niveaux. C'est vraiment des spécialistes de la terreur. Ils ont dû lire Mein Kampf.
And the mark of totalitarianism is intolerance, especially of ungodly activities. Loudspeakers pounding out verses of the Quran day and night. Constant marches and chanting. People can't lead normal lives or even sleep at night.
C'est une stratégie d'abord de l'occupation de l'espace et ensuite de harcèlement du pouvoir. Il y a une occupation de l'espace, c'est pour empêcher les autres forces, je dirais les forces démocratiques, d'occuper cet espace, et donc ils veulent pratiquer le monopole. Et donc ce sont les tactiques un peu de la guérilla urbaine, mais sous sa forme pacifique.
But some extremist groups have taken the holy war into their own hands. But it's not only men who've come under attack. There's a militant women's Islamic movement in Constantine who can be just as violent as their male counterparts. It's created a virtual state of war on the campus. One battle occurred during an exhibition for Women's Day. A group of women in hijabs literally ambushed the organisers. We spoke to one witness who managed to escape, but not before she had seen a brutal assault on her friend. She preferred to remain anonymous.
Elles étaient à peu près 5 ou 6 sur Fouzia. Et l'autre qui criait, le mot d'ordre, c'était tuez là, tuez là. Carrément, pas autre chose, hein. C'était tuez là, tuez là. Les autres étaient comme, je sais pas, imaginez, je sais pas, des gens qui n'ont pas mangé pendant 20 ans et puis d'un seul coup on met un poulet et tout le monde, c'était ça.
Et vous avez peur vous-même?
C'est-à-dire, ils créent cette de toute façon, même s'ils n'ont pas l'intention de me frapper ni rien, mais ils créent cette ambiance de terreur, on va, faites attention, nous sommes là, tout en disant non, on n'est pas violent.
Back in Algiers, the FIS leaders are keen to distance themselves from their militant supporters. They claim they don't have any control over them. The answer is to make everyone a good Muslim.
نحن ضد أي نوع من القهر. ونحن أيضا ضد أي نوع من القمع. ونحن أيضا ضد أي نوع من العنف. بقية سلوكات فردية لها انعكاسات فردية. نحن مع كل مظلوم. إذا وصل إلينا حال هؤلاء الناس واستطعنا الاتصال بهم سنزيل عنهم كل هذه العوامل التي تعتدي عن حريتهم.
But isolated acts of violence by FIS were nothing compared to the government's use of force in the weeks before the general election. The police presence enraged FIS supporters. They demanded the government listen to them. The rallies grew and they sang for an Islamic State in the 1st of May square. They came to listen to Ali Belhaj. But the more they were ignored, the more they dug in. Fearing a negative image from the state television service, FIS recorded themselves the behaviour of the security forces. There were attacks by armed police on innocent people, and it created havoc in the city centre. The police were keen to cordon off difficult areas of the capital, but their presence only seemed to create more support for FIS. Martyrs Square became like a holiday camp. The organisers rallied the rank and file, directing them to the FIS stronghold. Many planned for a long stay. The occupation of this public space was complete. But the government had already decided the fundamentalists had broken the rules. Negotiations with FIS on the management of the marches had broken down. The government accused FIS of disrupting the city. They wanted to clear the streets to allow a march of Democrats to take place. So they issued FIS with an ultimatum to stop their demonstrations. Midday on June the 4th, 2 central squares clearly belonged to FIS. But that night, police were ordered to move in to the 1st of May square. And the next day, FIS had got organised for the battle. They'd set up their own makeshift hospital where the injured were brought to recover. Volunteer doctors helped out. This man told us how tear gas can kill people when fired at close range, and later we were taken to the Bab el-Wed hospital to see the first of the many martyrs. That night, the police were again on the move, heading for the other FIS stronghold, Martyrs Square. This time they didn't only use tear gas and water cannon, but machine guns as well. The fundamentalists tried to resist behind their barricades, but they were no match for live ammunition. That night, the street chaos meant the end of the FLN government. It was dismissed. The next day, the president postponed the elections and called in the army in a show of force. But it was a hollow gesture, because he also conceded he'd offer himself for election, just what the fundamentalists had demanded.
So FIS appear to have won an extraordinary victory, and their supporters are already beginning to celebrate. They could now be closer than ever to achieving their dream of an Islamic state. But could it be at the cost of yet more violence?
On that, the future looks uncertain, even with pending presidential elections. It's not so easy to get back to normal and pretend democracy is undamaged. Memories of the clashes can't simply be swept away. FIS supporters still gather round their shrine to the latest martyrs. The problem is not everyone shares their vision.
Et si on arrive à asseoir un pouvoir démocratique, si on arrive à asseoir la démocratie dans mon pays, ce sera énormément d'espoir pour les Maghrébins, pour tout le Maghreb, mais aussi pour tous les pays arabes.
الأيام المقبلة ستبين لنا إن شاء الله من سيكون الفائز. وأعتقد أنه إذا كانت انتخابات حرة الفائز الأول هو الشعب الجزائري. وإذا فاز الشعب الجزائري فزنا نحن سواء كنا في الحكم أو في غيره.
But supposing the government doesn't keep its promises to FIS?
نحن ما زلنا في المعارضة والشعب ما يزال مستعدا لفرض إرادته. لئن عادوا عدنا.